Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds, Edge to Edge Transformation. Along the way, I meet people who have contributed at various points in making this transformation possible. And here with us today is Sherry. Sherry, tell us about you. How did you become the Sherry Hess that we all know today?
I always had a propensity for math and science, and that gets you into the engineering field. But then I quickly learned as I was working at Intel, I like a little more chaos. And so I jumped to a startup doing electromagnetic analysis that was a spin out from my alma mater of Carnegie Mellon. And I kind of got my career started there, solving Maxwell's equations instead of by hand with the assistance of the computer. Today, we call that multiphysics analysis. And since that time, I've done 3 startups. The third startup was eventually acquired by Cadence.
There was a time when EM and multiphysics was esoteric stuff. What got you interested in that?
So back last century, people didn't believe you could actually use commercial software for simulating electromagnetic behavior, whether it's of waveguides or antennas, or even electromechanical componentry like motors and solenoids. So a lot of the time early on was just proving to people you could trust virtual prototyping. And I think it was the fact that it was really embracing software and EDA, computers to change kind of our engineering prowess, and also just feeling like you're on the beginning of a new journey. I find that very inspiring and stimulating. And it also helped that one of the early employees at the company was a good friend of mine, also graduated double EE, and said, Sherry, come on, you got to have some fun here. Join me at this startup.
So, Sherry, that's very interesting. Like you, I did a string of 3 startups also after Intel.
Okay.
Right after Intel, because
So
I
we both
needed
started at Intel and then 3 startups. You're my digital
yeah.
twin.
Exactly. And Intel is one of the motherships that has produced thousands of startups. They became customers as well. Tell us a little bit about the startups. What was it like? How does it feel now that you're again in the stability of a big company?
Startups, to me, you get to create. People on my team that I have now, I talk about, we either spend our day in create time or make time. And create time is really where you can tap into your creative thought process, be strategic minded, versus make time where it really is make your emails go away. And I find in a startup, right, or a younger company, out of necessity, you spend the lion's share of your time in the create space, which just really resonates well for me. The positive that I tell people at Cadence, whether you're internal or external, is the multiphysics analysis group, which I'm part of that domain, bringing forth electromagnetic, power integrity, signal integrity, CFD technology, data center digital twins, a whole host of multiphysics. It is a newer about the past 10 years at Cadence. So we run in almost a startup mode within a larger organization. And it's that balance that I'm actually having a lot of fun with.
Indeed, that's very true. My third startup was acquired by Cadence. And then we all became entrepreneurs. Among all the creative endeavors you were a part of, which one would you say was the most interesting or challenging?
It can depend on what level of abstraction in terms of leadership skills. Certainly, I would say Cadence is the best mentor there because of the layers of wonderful managers. We're one of those best places to work, I think, for 6-7 years in a row now. As far as where I probably learned the most that sticks with me is my second startup that failed. Really kind of looking back and dissecting what went wrong and applying that on my future career journey.
That's so true. We always glamorize and everybody talks about success, but so much more gets learned when things don't go the way we expect it to. What would you say you learned the most from your failure?
Communication. There needed to be direct dialogue between the R&D and the business side, and can't really sugarcoat information, being very clear and concise. I call it tough love. What do we call it in Intel? Constructive confrontation. We really need to have that. So saying, oh, it's going to be fine. You're going to get the product next week. Oh, it's going to be fine. Wasn't true. Making sure that communication is honest and open and going deep, right? Keep asking that why question. There was also communication to our board as well, then reflecting like, oh, the run rate's great, everything's going to be wonderful, when it really wasn't. So don't be afraid to lean into the hard truths. Mm-hmm.
So very true. Asking why is really critical to success. So I'm going to ask you the why. Cadence has made multiple announcements. So my question to you is why multiphysics? Why AI? And why digital twins? and how is it going to change your customers' lives?
This is full circle moment. So when I started at the startup after Intel, we were speaking with different investors. I said, the world is going to get faster, smaller in terms of its electronics. They're going to be everywhere. You're on the cusp of multiphysics being a day in and day out analysis that every engineer is going to need. Now, fast forward to this century, it is so true, right? When you look at chip design or package design, board design, all the way out to what we talk about now as a data center, which really is a combination of electronics put into it. I used to call the closet is now a huge data center. You can't escape the multiphysics phenomenon. It's the difference between success and failure. It has really come mainstream. And Cadence is a leader in electronic design. Just part and parcel, you have to account for what we call the in-design multiphysics analysis, which is exactly what we're doing.
In the early days of Cadence, it was enough to understand how to make a good chip. That's definitely not okay now. And it's chiplets and packaging and electromechanical, thermal. Can you go into that a little bit? What are the complexities today that Cadence's customers, semiconductor companies, and systems companies face? And how can all this multiphysics help them?
I alluded to it before where things are running faster, whether higher in frequency or higher in speed. Also, the footprint is always shrinking. You got to go back to your physics, the electromagnetic phenomenon, the signal integrity, the crosstalk gets exacerbated. So again, prior generations, maybe your spacing wasn't as tight. You didn't have as many layers to your boards. You didn't have a very unique ground plane configurations. All of these changes and evolutions just bubble up. We call a shift left of multiphysics. You have to account for that day one. Now, what even gets better when you're running these simulations, now layer on AI to open up new insights, really optimize the design, because you can never do a manual permutation across all corner cases. But with AI, that becomes much more possible and realizable in real time, right? We're not talking take the next month or several months to get a result. We're turning those around in a matter of hours, if not days.
I recall a time engineers came from places like Carnegie Mellon. There would be like one woman in a whole room of men. Is it still like that, or have things changed? What has your journey been on the personal side, being an engineer?
I'm not always the only female or woman in the room. There's often some more people now. So I would say we're making progress. And I just always thought of me as me. I never figured there was a gender associated with it. But over the years, I've tapped into this. Let me point to my logo. IEEE, women in engineering, women in microwave. When you're at a startup, there's not a lot of people. So why there might have been other women there, I was likely the only double E female there. And so I found that I could also build a community of peers by tapping into the IEEE Society, joining the IEEE, because it can also help you with your own career, right? Sometimes it's easier to ask for advice from people that aren't in your company.
Now I believe you're in a more people-oriented role. What has that transition been like? What kind of skills come into play in this role?
If you haven't noticed, I like to talk to people. Elevating the message and kind of speaking at a business benefit all the way down into getting very technical is something that my team of product managers do. But I actually love to tell the story and make the connection human to human. There's a lot of nonverbal communication that goes on, just clearly with you nodding and I understand, you understand what I'm saying. But if I send an email or we don't have that human interaction, a lot can be left to interpretation. And that just feeds into my personality as well, being a bit of an extrovert and people person.
When we met at DesignCon, there was a lot of hoopla about the Millennium, Levi Stadium, football. What's going on there?
On Thursday, February 1st, Cadence announced the Millennium Multiphysics Enterprise Platform, and more specifically, what we're calling the Millennium M1 CFD supercomputer. It's a big to-do, not only because we had it at Levi Stadium, but because it really is going to be changing kind of the status quo for CFD simulation. CFD is another domain, multiphysics domain, that has very long computation time. For instance, we had Honda presenting where they're able to take advantage of the Millennium, which is a combination of dedicated hardware, uniquely architected with CPU and GPUs, with our software ported and tuned to it, some AI on it as well, available in a hardware software configuration that customers can access via the cloud or we can deliver on-prem. And so it's really giving better, deeper, faster insights into CFD computation. So think about Honda designing cars or aircraft as well. You have a lot of aircraft manufacturers out there. You have people doing turbo machinery. These things are very complex. They are almost multiphysics within their own multiphysics domain. And so simulation in days and weeks is typical. Now we're getting it down to hours. And another way I like to phrase it is it's make an engineering decision. You want to optimize your design, bring something to market. It's all about these sequence steps of making decisions on what is going to be the best design. You want to get that as quickly as possible every day, not make a decision every 2 months, for instance. So Millennium is very disruptive, very empowering for the engineering community to bring products to market quicker, more impactful simulations, faster, better.
So Sherry, we won't have to wait for 6 months again to get that one part that's missing in my car. Is that right?
That's correct.
Remember, we all went through that. I had to buy a Honda and I had to wait for a part for 6 months. This is great. Now, how is this technology? You mentioned it's a supercomputer for computational fluid dynamics. How is this different from existing solutions? Is it like a digital twin? Or I'm much more familiar with, let's say, the Palladium stuff, which is verification at a high level, RTL level, or system level design. How is this different?
I'm glad you mentioned the Palladium. It's a good analogy. So Cadence, we have our Palladium and our Protium boxes that we sell. And it's a combination of our own hardware design and a combination of our software. When you put the combination together, and again, I'm just saying we kind of tune it and optimize it for the best performance. It's a very great return on investment for our customers. So we're taking a little bit of that lessons that we've learned in that hardware software play, and we're bringing it over to multiphysics. So again, I said the Millennium is a multiphysics platform. I'm kind of wink, wink. You can see where it's going to go and evolve to. But today, the biggest hurdle we saw to empowering our designers, getting better results on multiphysics analysis has really been with CFD. So that's the one we went to first. It's dedicated hardware with our dedicated software on it and a turnkey solution.
Wow, we're getting into the supersonic age, and I can see it being applied in, say, even spaceships and going to Mars and things like that. Is that right?
Definitely. Stay tuned.
You worked in so many different roles, and what I see about you is that there's no slowdown, whether it's early in the morning, late in the evening. What keeps you most excited technologically? And how do you find that work-life balance with all this craziness all the time?
I love math and science, and so I find whether you're solving Maxwell's equations or Navier-Stokes in multiphysics, it's challenging, right? It's like a mind puzzle. So I'm just fascinated by that. And so I guess multiphysics is what I like to geek out on. There's always a new and different dimension to it. So it's always fresh. You can stay in that create mindset that I talked about. If you do what you love, it doesn't seem like work. And that's what energizes me and keeps me going. In my downtime, I can walk the beach or grab a cappuccino at Starbucks and hang out with girlfriends. So try to find that balance. But again, if you love what you do, it never feels like you're working.
That's true. And this time at DesignCon, it was almost like being in a fish market. There were so many people.
It was crazy, wasn't it? I mean, the buzz in the room and people all around it. It's great to see. It's really
it seems like the heydays of semiconductors are here. So now, given that even today, a lot of people have this phobia around joining something like deep technology, what advice do you give when people ask you about your work and should they go in there? Or math is hard, science is hard. These kinds of stereotypes still prevail, right? So how do you encourage people to get into these interesting and esoteric domains?
Anything that is hard just means it's probably worth the challenge, like to challenge myself. And recently at a leadership class at Berkeley, they talked about these 3 circles. You're in your comfort zone, and then you're in your learning zone, and then what I call the freak out zone. And we should aspire to live not necessarily in our comfort zone, but in our learning zone. And so whether it's for myself, for my team, or friends, let's get into that learning zone, and life is good.
Sherry, it's a joy talking to you about all these things. This whole changes that are happening here. What can they do to really keep that excitement going rather than resign saying, oh my God, robots are going to take over the world?
Believe in yourself, keep learning, network with people. We're all connected. I don't think we're going to be replaced by robots. Learn, network, and keep growing.
Thanks a lot, Sherry. And this is the reason, my friends, I talk to different people. Because unless I talk to people in different domains, there's no way I don't have a crystal ball to predict the future. It's just changing at a breakneck speed. Gone are the days when man landed on the moon. And even in those days, we had to do simulation. And we did that with small computers.
Oh my
Today,
goodness, yes.
we have to do much more complex things if we have to have a Mars mission or a fully autonomous car. And the only way to learn is by asking questions. I learn
Correct.
much more when I ask these questions. So
Correct.
thank you again, Sherry, and keep up
Thank
that
you.
thing going. Hopefully, we'll have
Yeah.
supersonic jets in our backyard soon, right? At this
Would be
rate.
great. I'm happy that we met at DesignCon. It's been a pleasure.